And tonight, let's talk more about the rift between the president and the vice president and how this animosity has affected the country. And we have with us political scientist and UP Diliman Department of Political Science Assistant Professor Ranjit Rai. He's also the president of Octa. I almost said Octa Gear, but the Octa Group. He joins us tonight for this discussion. Sir, Professor, magandang gabi and thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, yeah, thank you for inviting me. Again, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of you and to all of our citizens watching us today.
Merry Christmas, sir. Now, I hate to spring this on you, pero the last trust and performance survey we had from Octa Research was the third quarter survey, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Now, I'm fairly certain that you already have a fourth quarter survey.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you can give us a sneak preview of that.
Yeah, okay.
Kahit ramdam lang.
Well, we have a fourth quarter survey. We finished our survey data up to the second week of December. Unfortunately, we're still processing that data and will be coming out by the first week of January. This is traditionally in Octa, we release our fourth quarter in the first 2 weeks of January. Yeah. So right now, I don't have any new data except to reiterate what we've been seeing, as a survey organization as far as governance and democracy are concerned. And it was very clear, especially in the last quarter, that Filipinos support democracy. 8 out of 10 Filipinos will support democracy, even with all its problems. No? So the data suggests that Filipinos want reform, not regime change. And I think to a great extent, that was what shaped the last quarter, the third and the fourth quarter, as far as political events were concerned. But when you ask everyday Filipinos if they're satisfied with democracy, only 40% say they are. So, it's really performance, in a sense, that is needed. Democracy provides a promise, but it's performance that Filipinos are complaining about. No? And to a great extent, the elite infighting we've had over the last 2 years have eroded people's confidence in that democracy. I think it's probably the single biggest threat to democracy now. Our elites fighting against each other and eroding people's confidence not just in democracy but also in governance.
Sir, just for context, I know of course you cannot give us much detail about the fourth quarter survey. In fairness, kasi nga naman, January pa nyo ilalabas dapat yung results. But the third quarter survey, drawing from that, we saw a dips in the numbers of BBM and Sara Duterte. BBM 7%, 7 points dip in trust and 8 points dip in performance. VP Sara, 3 points dip in trust, 1 point dip in performance. I know you can't give us the details yet, but have we seen any changes in the trends?
Well, right now we're not optimistic about trends changing, given the fact that when you look at the whole year, we started with a very significant midterm election where it was practically a stalemate for both the administration and the emerging opposition then. You see the opposition support consolidating with the rest of the former President Duterte, and the ensuing political conflict after that, especially with the impeachment, and then later on, with this political scandal, massive political scandal over corruption with regards to flood control projects. We see the whole year really as a declining trend for both leaders. And Filipinos are looking for performance, not promises. They're looking for a solution to their everyday problems, which are still rooted in economic issues. Number one issue in Octa surveys for the last 3 quarters is really inflation, the price of goods. Filipinos want a solution to the high prices of goods. And I think the government has been slowly doing something about that. Inflation has gone down significantly since the first quarter. Number 2 is, of course, the issue of accessible, cheap food, like in particular rice. But number 2 is also corruption. Which became which hit the top 5 and is now number 2 as far as the third quarter survey results of Octa is concerned, it's become a very important issue because the president himself, illuminated, no, these problems, no, and that's become a big scandal that's affected the political class since the third quarter. Third, of course, is the issue of jobs, wages. Okay, and so these are the top three concerns of everyday Filipinos. They largely deal with gut issues, and if the government is unable to perform, people's trust in democracy and governance and good governance will go down, and that will be, I think, the big challenge in 2026. How do we turn this around? How do we turn the economy around? Which, by the way, modestly grew in the third quarter. We don't know what the final numbers are this quarter. And how will good governance, reforms in institutions, especially in places like DPWH, will improve the performance of government in general?
But Professor, I'm curious, between corruption, gut issues, and inflation, which one do you think is weighing more heavily on public opinion?
I think right now, it used to be primarily gut issues, but since the third quarter, corruption has crashed in the top five, and it's now currently at number two, no, top concern of everyday Filipinos dealing with corruption, and corruption is, we looked at the issue, and in the third quarter, it was very clear Filipinos are very angry about it. No, we looked at how people felt. More than 60% were angry, and around 30% were anxious and fearful about what was happening. Okay, number two, and this is very important, Filipinos are not just angry, they want certain outcomes to be realized. Number one, people have to go to jail, people have to be held accountable. Number two, the accountability has to be established. Number two, people have to go to jail. Number three, people have to return the money. And of course, institutions have to be reformed. So very clear, as far as our surveys are concerned, these are the top four concerns of four expectations of Filipinos as far as dealing with this corruption scandal is concerned. They want people to go to jail. They want the money returned, so that's restitution. And third, they want institutional reform.
But Professor, since your last survey, your third quarter survey, there have been many developments already surrounding the flood control probe. Arrest warrants have been issued. The ICI has also wrapped up its investigations for the year at least. Do you think that has changed in any way the sentiments of the public?
I think so, because certain things have happened. For one, we have a very activist ombudsman now. It's always on TV talking about what's happening. We have the ICI now. That's to some extent transparent, and its discussions are open. And of course, there's lots of institutional reforms that are happening. People are talking too much about the budget. I mean, it's not a perfect budget. No budget is perfect. But this current budget is a product of the reform, no, and the protests that have ensued because of the corruption scandal. So a lot of transparency was put into the process of making the budget, and in the budget itself, we're reallocating so much resources for human development. So a lot of things have happened. A lot of things still need to happen for certain reforms to take place. I don't know, to answer finally the question of your questions. I don't know if the president's numbers are going to improve or the vice president's numbers are going to improve. What Filipinos are looking for is good governance now. What Filipinos are looking for is for them to continue to have faith in democracy. And this is why all this infighting politically, all this noise, is really damaging to both democracy and development. That's why in the next year, the focus has to be on institutional reform. And I think that's what, government and certain sectors are trying to do.
But these dip in the numbers of both the president and the vice president, and we're going to need you to wear the hat of a political analyst for this one, Professor. What do they mean in terms of the political capital of both President Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte? Because some critics say that the last 2 years of President Marcos will be all about political survival. Do you agree?
To some extent, but the president's not running anymore. The framing that it's an existential threat is one way to look at it, but another way to look at it is elite political conflict has truly damaged, people's perceptions about democracy and governance, no? The data of Octa from the second to the third quarter of this year indicate that elite political infighting has eroded public confidence in democracy, and more than any single policy failure. I guys is saying more than any single policy failure of the government, it's the fighting that our elites have been doing and shown in social media and in news, reported every day. That's really, how should you say this, making our people more and more pessimistic about governance, the prospects for good governance and democracy. So yung low institutional trust or lowering of institutional trust is largely a product of that infighting. Now, we're used to this kind of infighting in the past, but this right now it's in the words of some analysts so severe, and at the point that some people are saying it's now an existential fight. This while elites fought each other, what the surveys, at least Octa surveys, are showing is that citizens were more worried about corruption, prices, and service delivery. They were focusing on that, not the political drama. So the next year should be, there has to be a way to, prevent further damage to the institutional credibility of the state, di ba? And we're seeing that in the data also. Octa's data is showing that a widening gap between the belief in democracy and trust in democratic institutions. So I think the focus next year, this year, and for the coming years is really institutional reform. And that will require our elites to pause for a moment, no? To forget their partisan personal interests and look at the country as a whole, because this is not about the Marcoses and Dutertes anymore. It's about all of us. And I'm happy, I'm hopeful, because while government is still trying to get its game in place, people are engaged in democratic initiatives. No, the last few months of protests are a hallmark that democracy is alive in our country and that people are engaged in the everyday life of their country. And while they are doing that, because they're doing that, I'm hopeful that certain reforms will emerge. And the more people participate in our democracy, the better that it becomes. The stronger, the deeper it becomes. No? So the more people participate, whether it's in protests or in the everyday lives of their communities, democracy is deepened and broadened. And that's my hope. That's what makes me hopeful for 2026. Because the more people are engaged, the better governance and democracy becomes for our country.
Pero sir, conversely, the massive protests, of course, they are an expression of democracy, but they're also overshadowed in many ways by all these reports and rumors of some people instigating, at least on the side of the military, the creation of a transition council, a civil-military junta, withdrawal of support, and so on down the line. In other words, extra constitutional solutions to our worsening problem. Now, I bring that up because, as you said nga kanina, it appears that our biggest threat to democracy at this point is the political infighting among the elites. Are we in any danger of losing confidence and faith in democracy because of what is happening now, that 2026 raises the shadow of people actually supporting extra-constitutional means?
So far, our data, Ed, is not showing any strong support for extra-constitutional means for changing governance. There's no data in Octa then and now just to show any strong support for that. Our own data shows that despite its many problems, 8 out of 10 Filipinos continue to support democracy. 7 out of 10 Filipinos support the armed forces of the Philippines. They trust and support the armed forces of the Philippines. Nearly 8 out of 10 trust it. And they trust it for very specific reasons. One of those reasons is because it has stayed out of politics and continues to be apolitical. And so it's very clear, for Filipinos, it's not regime change. It's improving the performance of our democracy. It's making democracy impact on their everyday life. And that will require good governance. But good governance requires, statesmen and, of course, strong institutions. And the expose of the president, which has cost him politically, and tasted some, what I believe is short-term instability, both in the economy and in politics, might be the way forward because it has galvanized a new coalition of support for him. He's lost his coalition basically in the House and in the Senate. He's trying to win that. He used to use that as a shield. Today, because of what he did and because of the support of the people for this cause against anti-corruption, he can now use the people as his sword. He used to use the Congress and the elites as his shield. Now he has to use the people as his sword to move forward and push these reforms forward. Because right now, there's no turning back. He opened a Pandora's box. Unfortunately for him, there's no turning back. He has to move forward. Not because of legacy, not because he has to have high ratings. I don't think the president's there for popularity anymore. He wants to do something right. He wants to leave a legacy. It's really to help the people because if we cannot solve this problem, Ed, governance will deteriorate, trust in democracy will decline, and who knows what will happen in the future. No, it might be more. People will be more open to these extra constitutional means. No, this undermining democracy. Okay, so this is the situation now. So it's more than the existential threat to Duterte and the Marcoses, it's the existential threat to democracy.
Yes, sir.
That's the key balance now, and everybody has to be on it. And this is a whole of nation challenge. If we want democracy to persist, we have to work at it.
Okay, sir. We'll leave it at that. An existential threat to democracy that we have to protect to the very end. Maraming salamat for joining us tonight and Merry Christmas. Political Science Professor Ranjit, also President of Octa Research Group.